Hello, my name is Nick Koehler, and I am coming to you from my home office in Kansas City, Missouri. So today I'm going to share with you a story about Wallace B. Smith and how he felt called by the Spirit to put himself in what some people might call an incredibly awkward situation. And this was all for the sake of extending an invitation to an alienated group of people to work toward reconciliation together. So this story takes place in January 1983, but to understand the context behind it, we're going to have to go back about 5 years to 1978. Now, dissent has always been a part of our church's heritage, and during the turbulent times of the late 60s and 70s, there was a growing discrepancy between church members who wanted to move theologically closer to the Protestant mainstream and those who wanted to see a return to older values and doctrine of the church's history. So by 1978, the various dissenting groups that wanted to kind of return to the church's history and the doctrine therein kind of formed under this organized banner called the Restoration Festival Incorporated. So then, fast forwarding to January of 1983, then prophet president of the church, Wallace B. Smith, calls on Apostle Roy H. Schaefer to ask if he will accompany him to a Restoration Festival Inc. worship service, claiming that he is feeling led to share something with the group gathering there. So, the two men ride together and enter into the schoolhouse where the worship is being held, and they ask if the presider's there. Two elders tell him that the presider hasn't arrived yet, so Smith expresses his desire to share something with those gathered during the service to them. This creates obvious confusion for the men because they were not expecting him to arrive, and because none of them were presiding, they didn't have the authority to let President Smith speak or not. After going back and forth for a few minutes, they eventually agree to let Smith speak. So when the presider finally shows up, Smith and Schaefer had already been seated on the rostrum with the other elders assisting with the service. Though he could have asked Smith and Schaefer to leave, the presider simply allowed the service to begin. When the time came for Smith to speak, his message was simple. Smith came to extend reconciliation to the restoration worship. Whether liberal or conservative, they all shared the same heritage, and Smith expressed great concern for the relationships broken by opposing viewpoints. Rather than breaking away, the prophet encouraged them to work toward reconciliation despite interpreting the revelation of God in different ways and emphasizing different aspects of the church's story. Overall, Smith let it be known that he promised to serve the church, which included everyone in it. In his final sentence, he even said, "So is the door of the church open to you, and it will not be closed until you close it." This story strikes me because if I had been in President Smith's shoes, I'm not sure if I would have been able to exhibit the same compassion that he did. While he wanted to push the vision of the church forward, this group only made it more difficult for him. Yet, Smith was not concerned with that. He was concerned with the shattered relationships and the alienated people on both sides who were wrestling with their identity and searching for a method to heal. This is a perfect display of how the church does not exist to push a certain ideology, but rather exists for the community. If the church can't encourage pathways to healing and understanding, in spite of the vast differences that work to divide us, then perhaps the church's ideology is not a church-like ideology at all. Thank you for listening.